Our reading this morning is from the autobiography of Mother Jones by Mary Harris Jones. And as I read this, I really want to invite you to notice how the themes she shares, while her stories are from the past, remain all too present. Mother Jones writes, "I was born in the city of Cork in Ireland in 1830. My people were poor. For generations, they had fought for Ireland's freedom. Many of my folks have died in that struggle. My father, Richard Harris, came to America in 1835, and as soon as he had become an American citizen, he sent for his family. Of that citizenship, I have ever been proud. I was married in 1861 in Memphis, Tennessee. My husband was an iron molder and a staunch member of the Iron Molders Union. In 1867, a yellow fever epidemic swept Memphis. Its victims were mainly among the poor and the workers. The rich and the well-to-do fled the city. Schools and churches were closed. People were not permitted to enter the house of a yellow fever victim without permits. One by one, my 4 little children sickened and died. My husband caught the fever and died. I sat alone through nights of grief. No one came to me. No one could. After the Union had buried my husband, I got a permit to nurse the sufferers. This I did until the plague was stamped out. I returned to Chicago and went again into the dressmaking business with a partner. We worked for the aristocrats of Chicago, and I had ample opportunity to observe the luxury and extravagance of their lives. Often, while sewing for the lords and barons who lived in magnificent houses on Lakeshore Drive, I would look out of the plate glass windows and see the poor, shivering wretches, jobless and hungry, walking along the frozen lakefront. The contrast of their conditions with that of the tropical comfort of the people for whom I sewed was painful to me. My employers seemed neither to notice nor to care. From the time of the Chicago fire in 1871, I became more and more engrossed in the labor struggle, and I decided to take an active part in the efforts of the working people to better the conditions under which they worked and lived. I became a member of the Knights of Labor. One of the first strikes I remember occurred in the 70s. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad employees went on strike, and they sent for me to come and help them. I went. The mayor of Pittsburgh brought in deputy sheriffs, a lawless, reckless bunch of fellows. They pillaged and burned and rioted and looted. Their acts were charged up to the striking working men. The governor sent in the militia. I knew the strikers personally. I knew, as everybody knew, who really perpetrated the crimes of burning the railroad's property. Then and there, I learned early in my career that labor must bear the cross of other sins, must be the vicarious sufferer for the wrongs that others do. From 1880 on, I became wholly engrossed in the labor movement. The workers in Chicago started an agitation for an 8-hour day. The trade unions and the Knights of Labor endorsed the movement, but because many of the leaders of the agitation were foreigners, the movement itself was regarded as foreign and un-American. Then the anarchists of Chicago, a very small group, espoused the cause of the 8-hour day. The employers used the cry of anarchism to kill the movement. A person who believed in an 8-hour working day was, they said, an enemy to his country, a traitor, an anarchist. The city was divided into 2 angry camps. The working people, on one side, hungry, cold, jobless, fighting gunmen and police clubs with their bare hands. On the other side, the employers, knowing neither hunger nor cold, supported by the newspapers, by the police, by all the power of the great state itself. The 1st of May, which was to usher in the 8-hour work days of uprising, came. All over the city there were strikes, walkouts. Employers quaked in their boots. They saw a revolution. The workers in McCormick Harvester Works gathered outside the factory. Those inside who did not join the strike were called scabs. Bricks were thrown. The police, without warning, charged down upon the workers, shooting into their midst. Many were trampled under horse feet. Numbers were shot dead. Young men and girls were clubbed to death. On the evening of May 4th, the anarchists held a meeting in the shabby, dirty district known to later history as Haymarket Square. Carter Harrison, the mayor of Chicago, attended the meeting. After leaving, he went to the chief of police and instructed him, send no mounted police to the meeting, as it was being peacefully conducted. The presence of mounted police would only add fuel to the fires already burning red in the hearts of the workers. But orders, perhaps, came from other quarters. For disregarding the report of the mayor, the chief of police sent mounted policemen in large numbers to the meeting. One of the anarchists was addressing the crowd. A bomb was dropped from a window overlooking the square. A number of the police were killed in the explosion that followed. Hundreds were arrested. Only those who had agitated for an 8-hour day, however, were brought to trial and a few months later hanged. The Sunday following the executions, the funerals were held. Thousands of workers marched behind the black hearse, not because they were anarchists, but because they felt that these men, whatever their theories, were martyrs for the workers' struggle. In the cemetery of Waldheim, the dead were buried, but with them was not buried their cause. Their struggle for the 8-hour day, for more human conditions and relations between man and man lived on, and still lives on. So, we commemorate International Workers' Day to honor those that died in the violent conflicts between strikers and police in the early days of May in Chicago in 1886, and others who were later executed by the state for agitating and organizing to limit the workday to 8 hours, something most of us take for granted today, but which at that time, as we heard in the words of Mother Jones, was labeled as un-American. Anarchism, only supported by foreign agitators, punishable by death. Mother Jones' story has resounding echoes here in the 21st century. She was an immigrant and a naturalized citizen when a deadly disease landing hardest on the poor and working people began her journey to radicalization. Witnessing stark income inequality and violence against those who sought equity pushed her into activism. Activists in the streets were called foreigners and anarchists to justify state violence, and then the violence was blamed on the activists rather than the state. This sounds so familiar to me, my friends. And even as her story shows us a through line to the dehumanization and state violence against those who would challenge it that we see today, please remember, the demands of the workers who died in and because of the Haymarket riots in May of 1886, those demands were met. They won the 8-hour workday. Mother Jones' life experience was bleak, my friends. And yet 140 years later, we live her dream. Never doubt that we can win. This week has been such an interesting week for me to be contemplating labor because it was the week that my 18-year-old entered the workforce in earnest with 3 days of training for her first retail job. On the first day when she got home, she told me that things had gone well, but her throat was hurting. She had to get permission from a manager anytime she needed a drink of water, and they were so busy she hadn't found a minute to even ask, let alone go get the water that she needed. The next morning, she realized she was getting sick, but she also knew, even though this is her first time as an employee, that it would jeopardize her brand new job to call in sick her first week. So she and her germs went back to work for training. Now this sounds par for the course, right? This is what it means to have a job in the United States of America. And this is why I am lifting up International Workers' Day from our pulpit. What it means to have a job is that you must ask for permission from your boss to meet your most basic survival needs during your working hours. It means that you ignore the physical needs and limitations of your own body, instead putting your boss's need for labor above your own well-being. This is what it means to labor here, my friends. And I stand before you today to say that this is wrong. It is contrary to our Unitarian Universalist values. It is a system where the love that we seek to put in the center is nowhere to be found, where greed and exploitation are rewarded. We got the 8-hour workday, but we're still waiting for what Mother Jones called more human conditions and relations between man and man. And that, my friends, is because of the violence inherent in the system, to quote Monty Python in a wholly serious and entirely unfunny way, because that's exactly what it is. Our extractive and exploitive economic system is doing violence to all of us and to our beloved Earth all the time, from the Amazon warehouses to the data centers, from the factories to the farms, from the nursing homes to the coffee shops. The Knapp bishop, Tricia Hersey, a present-day daughter of Chicago, wants us to develop a different relationship to our body's labor. In her book, Rest is Resistance, she writes, quote, "When I think about the history of the transatlantic slave trade, chattel slavery, and plantation labor, I am stunned by how much we have chosen to forget that capitalism was built from these systems. An experimentation in how to push a human body to a machine-level pace for centuries, led by white people dizzy with hate and brainwashed by a system that trained them to look at a divine human body as property to be owned." End quote. The violence inherent in the system, my friends, it is not over. It persists. In the essential workers who could not stay home to avoid the impact of a deadly global pandemic just 6 years ago, inhumane working conditions persist. In the acceptance of the ongoing transmission of COVID-19 for the past 4 or 5 years, pushing workers back into workplaces whose standard practices ensure the spread of sickness to workers and customers, the violence persists. In the scapegoating of immigrant workers to avoid the truth that our economic system will squeeze all it can out of any body it encounters for the least money possible. It is hard to look at this system and find hope. But Mother Jones has it for us. Because 140 years ago, what we know as basic workplace practices were radical, impossible, leftist dreams, dreams that came true. The struggle of the workers never ended, my friends. May we continue it into the future. May we imagine a world where love is at the center of our lives and our work and our working lives. And may we resist the violence inherent in the system, dismantle the exploitative and extractive structures, and build the world we dream about, where the wealth of our nation is equitably shared, where we recognize our interdependence with each other and the more than human world. May it be so. May we be the ones who make it so. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.